now it's kind of ubiquitous across all of the VFX space. And
so when you talk about life sciences, give me an example. I have no idea what you mean.
So if you go into a hospital and you need to have what they call gait retraining, right? You use these markers and these cameras to track your movement, and then they can help. That helps inform whether you need surgery, what kind of surgery you need in order to kind of make your gait better, right?
Okay.
So it's a pretty well-known tool used in the hospitals, right? And then also sports biomechanics, right? So athletes use it to sort of analyze their movements very, very closely. So that's kind of what the sort of born all of the very high precision and high accuracy requirements of our system, right?
Yeah, cool. And then I remember, like, when video games started getting better, I remember seeing Tiger Woods in a black suit at EA with balls all over him, and they were doing motion capture for the Tiger Woods PGA Tour game. Like, so it went from Hollywood to video games, and was that the trajectory basically?
Yeah. So I guess, you know, we have motion capture, which is a generic kind of tool. And then once the Hollywood and the games, they started seeing what was happening in the hospitals, and, you know, we essentially just digitize motion and then provide that motion data to the animators to be able to put whatever retarget or whatever skin they want on top of that motion data. So Tiger Woods is great. You know, you have Tiger Woods in there doing his moves, and then they put Tiger Woods onto the animation within the game. But, you know, whether sort of, I guess for our case here, right, in this Clockwork Forest experience, you have a different animation, right? You're a scientist exploring something, so you can kind of retarget whatever you want onto this motion data that is used capturing our motion capture systems.
Yeah, cool. So we're gonna go back to Aaron, and we're gonna see where you guys came together. So Aaron, talk a little bit about, you know, Dreamscape and your background and how you got here, and a little bit about the kind of the vision and ethos of Dreamscape when you started.
Sure. And, you know, I could probably take the full hour just trying to tell our story, and I'll try not to do that. Truly, you know, Dreamscape Immersive came together. Let me start by saying that for me, you know, my ethos, thesis of everything that I've worked on are what are next generation platforms to which people engage with experience. Dreamscape Immersive came together essentially as a group of storytellers, content creators, and experience makers in partnership with an incredible group of Swiss technologists at Artem Interactive, who had built a platform that was enabled by the Vicon, tracking system and software solution that allowed, exactly as Mark was saying, to retarget. And instead of going and capturing a Tiger Woods, we wanted to be able to put you into the experience, not as an actor, but as yourself. And what was really amazing when we first experienced this, which was the immediate suspension of disbelief that came through having full body presence, from having full body presence inside of a shared experience with others. And once you had that suspension of disbelief, we were able to really start to infuse the concept of cinematic narrative techniques. How can you take somebody on a journey? How can you make them feel as though they're part of the story? How do you remove the friction and the barriers, things like controllers, where your body is your agent and really your controller through an experience? And that was everything that, to be honest, prior to this kind of full body track live, render tracking solution, everything that we didn't appreciate about VR, that was actually pushing us away from it. Isolated, disembodied, controller based. We didn't feel like we could actually take you there. So the promise for Dreamscape has always been, we'll take you there. We can take you to these fantastical places, but underlying all of it is the sort of set of values which really require to virtualize you, to make you feel as though you are in the physical, to remove all of those points of friction. And that was sort of the nexus of how we started working together with Vicon, which was actually the pre-existing relationship between this technology foundation and Vicon. which, as Mark was saying, actually did come out of medical research. It came out of studies around the skeletal system, and really sort of performance and enhancing activity. So to be able to have that really accurate, low latency, the direct kind of relationship between the physical and the virtual was a massive unlock. And that was what created Dreamscape. Initially, we started in location-based entertainment. We knew that the way to introduce people to new technologies is by actually engaging things that they already do, right? People don't adopt technology because technology is cool. They adopt it because it makes something that they're already doing better. And so entertainment and story is as old as man. How can we make story better? How can you make it boundless and frameless? And once you do that, once people start getting acclimated and appreciating what this technology can do, not gimmick, not technology for technology's sake, but improving on experience and condition, well, then you can really start applying it in much greater use cases, which kind of unfolds in the following story of Dreamscape in our work in education and training and simulation, in fields above and beyond entertainment. So that's the quick background.
Yeah, cool. So you talked about I'm sorry, I'm driving and talking at the same time. You talked about the no controllers and this sense of what I'm going to call like it deepens the immersion. Talk a little bit about how important that was, and then what are some of the challenges that the current / prior technology, before we get to the new Markerless real-time capture stuff that you showed at SIGGRAPH, which we'll talk about in a second. But talk about some of the challenges operationally, design-wise, technologically, support, and you guys can both chime in here. We'll start with Aaron. That the current / almost prior state of the technology created for the business.
Sure. Well, first, let me say that without it, we wouldn't exist, because again, that idea of controller, floating head, floating hands is non-starter in taking people on a journey, for us at least. Bob, as you noted in a prior conversation we had, one of the things that you noticed is one of the tricks, one of the pieces that we do, bring people into immersion isn't a smash cut. It's actually, wading into the waters. So when you go to a Dreamscape experience, before the experience starts, the first thing that happens is you're essentially, confronted with or in front of a mirror. And every time, human condition is the same thing. People look, they recognize in the mirror it's themselves because they're in their avatar state.
I just want to clarify for the audience, if you haven't seen it, it's actually a virtual mirror. So you're in VR, but then there's a mirror in the VR experience, so you see your avatar and you connect with it at a really personal level.
Yeah, and the first thing that happens is they do this. Now they realize that's me. That's what I look virtualized. What I look like virtualized, and then all of a sudden people dance. It's just the thing that happens every time, whether it was the Fortnite or the TikTok dance, whatever it is, it always happens. Then they realize that as they're looking in the mirror, they're also seeing their neighbors, the people that are standing in that line. And we always encourage, say, one, now you see yourself, engage with the person next to you. And this is a really crucial moment in our appreciation for the technical solution that Vicon and Artem had created, which is when you turn to your neighbor pre-COVID, and we would say, now shake hands. Okay, we stopped saying that, but when people went and did that physical connection in the virtual space created an immediate bond. And now you realize that you are blending the digital and the physical, the tactile and the virtual. So incredibly amazing. Now to the challenges of it. Just
before you get to the challenges, I just want to say that, hey James, dude, I love that guy. I just want to say that I've always told people there's a lot of companies that were using hand tracking and foot tracking but they weren't actually using it to make the experience better. And the thing that you just talked about, Aaron, where you get them to, do this, and I know, Sandbox VR has one where in order to revive your partner, you need to put your hand on their shoulder, and then it brings them back to life if they die. And it's those moments of where you actually apply the technology to the experience can help pay for the friction that you're about to talk about. But if you're not going to actually build the really wow moment, the benefit into it, there's no sense in putting your operators through that hassle.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, for a long time in the evolution of VR, the hardware manufacturers were the creators of content. And they would try to create content that would show all the things that it could do, but they're not storytellers, they're not content creators. And fair enough. But what you had was content that was there for the hardware's sake. And what we created is content that leveraged what the hardware was capable of to make the content better. Not to show what the hardware can do, but to make the experience better, to create those connections, to really inspire collaboration, handoffs, teamwork, things that make that bond such that when you come out of it, number one, it sears into your memory as though it sears into your mind as though it was a real memory, as though it actually happened, right? You blur that line and you really were there, and you have something that people love to talk about. I can't tell you how many times we've seen people come out, talk about how they went through something together, they helped one another out of it, and now they have something, they have a common, theme, they have a connection, and that connection builds and continues. That's why, by the way, for us, organic word of mouth has always been the greatest, contributor to new interactions. To the friction side of it is, and I think anybody who's an operator can appreciate this, the more kit, the more gear, the more hardware you put on your user, the greater the challenge you're going to have, right? It's time consuming, it's cost, it's labor, it's things that can go wrong. I mean, how many different kinds of straps did we have to play with so that things don't kick off in the middle of the experience, right? If somebody loses a foot, all of a sudden their avatar, their leg goes wild because their pulsar, their marker is sitting over here, their body's over here, and now you have somebody who's trying to scramble around in the dark and get their foot back on. You have to charge things, you have to clean things. It's a heavy amount of friction. It was ultimately incredibly worthwhile. But from day one, in 2016, we were still making our own backpacks, to the next step when you had 1070s on your back and retroreflective spheres on, hard plates, on your hands and feet, to the active markers. We always sat there and said, and then you went into a T-pose for your calibration. So you had to worry about not hitting the person next to you when you're trying to get 6 people down a line. All of these things, we knew that there would be this point when it was engineered out. When you put the headset on, you step through that portal and you are in that experience that is qualitatively better, because now you're not even in these limited points of capture, of tracking. You have the full body. But the friction has been worth it, but the desire and drive to take all of this off the body and put it in the corner is really paramount importance.
Yeah, cool. So Mark, when did you guys start playing around or thinking that it was time to implement markerless tracking? Like when did that start?
Well, I mean, Markerless has always been, I guess, the holy grail of motion capture. Everyone, from before my time, right? Sort of in the 80s and 90s, Markerless will come and replace Market. And, we're still here sort of 39 years later with markers being a very strong sort of use case. As the work in machine learning and the compute power with GPUs, as they started to kind of be driven by all of the autonomous vehicles, all of that work done through there, we started really seriously looking at how this could be leveraged into our own industry, right? And was it time to really kind of put that effort in and do the R&D required to bring a new modality into the motion capture sort of toolbox. So we have been working on this for a good 3 years with Artanum as a development partner, understanding, I guess, the use case of 6 people in real time, and the need for the technology to be not present. Right, it has to be good enough that you don't recognize it, you don't know it's there, and it enables this amazing experience that kind of Aaron was talking about, right? So for us to do a good job, you need to not notice us, right? and you know, bringing sort of 6 people in real time, super low latency. That was kind of the bar we set, and worked with the Geneva team to kind of you know, really focus our efforts on the R&D to kind of deliver this, right? And you know, I guess that's kind of where we were at SIGGRAPH, that we kind of presented this you know, the 6-person experience to the world, where we first kind of showed.
Let's we got some video. Let's roll some video, Aaron. I've always wanted to say that.
And I hope you're talking Aaron Friedman in the background.
Yeah, Aaron Friedman. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to, what button do I press?
The guy in the director's booth, right?
Yeah.
There it is. Here we go. Click for audio. Got audio but no video. Well, picture, imagine this, we're at a trade show. Are you guys seeing that? Or...
Yep.
Oh, you're seeing it, okay. All right, well, luckily I've seen it before, so I know it was on it, because it didn't play for me.
I heard it fine. And one thing, just wanted to clarify, and thanks, Mark, for that. The Artemis being the research and development arm of Dreamscape, and Geneva, when Mark refers to it, is actually where we have that, where that office is based.
Yeah. And so, Mark, how long ago was it? So that show was just last month, or maybe even this month, right? A couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
How far back on the calendar did you guys say, hey, I think this is ready to show the world at SIGGRAPH? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, it's an innovation, right? We're showcasing. It's not a product yet, and I guess we looked at each other in the eyes seriously, sort of earlier this year, to say, is this good enough to show? And we all kind of sort of said yes, and then really put the development sort of path together to make sure that what we delivered was something that we could hang our hats on. And I really think the team did an excellent job, and should be really proud of what we showed. So it is very much an innovation work in progress, not a product yet. So there was a time earlier this year that we really had to sit down and look each other in the eye and go, are we going to do this or not?
And Aaron, when did you first see this?
I've been tracking. Yeah, I've been tracking this for a while. I mean, I think when I really got excited about this on the roadmap, and we've been talking about it, as Mark said, forever, right? I mean, this is just sort of the thing that you've been waiting for. Get rid of the backpack, get rid of the markers, get quickly into full immersion with full body agency and presence. I was at our Geneva office in September, and 6 of us, and we have, a pod there, a pod being, one of our experience stages. And a group of us crowded into a corner of that pod and looked at this monitor and saw all of our dots, representing our skeletons separately. And it was at that moment, I was like, okay, this is coming off of the white paper and into reality. And, to the credit of the teams, it's really fantastic, because it was at that time where August was, September last year, where August was plotted. And SIGGRAPH was plotted, and this was sort of the goal. And it was, I think, a driving factor. And the fact that it got there and the way that it operated was just, tremendous. For something that, as Mark said, isn't a product yet, it certainly felt and operated like a product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool.
So, as a result, I've been pushing, aggressively on the Vicon team to, for us to be rolling this out in various forms and functions, and in our cases.
Yeah, cool. Mark, what are some of the limitations? James, one of your questions, and for those of you who don't know, down in the corner there, James Jensen is the former CTO at the Void, but now is running a company called Limitless Flight Jump, which is one of my favorite location-based VR experiences of all time. If you guys haven't done it, it's amazing in Utah, and it's worth the trip out there. And thanks for joining us. So how many tracking points? You know, we think of tracking points because of markers, but how does this machine vision markerless tracking, like, do we need different vernacular when we talk about how this works? Because you mentioned skeletons, like you don't talk about skeletons when you're talking about tracking points necessarily, are you?
Well, you do. I mean, you know, your body is a skeleton, and you know there's a combination of tracking, and so you track joints and body position, or body markers, right? So they call them key points.
So key points, okay.
Key points are what they call them in the industry. But you know, relating that to, I guess, markered mocap. So for a joint, you know, you put markers on either side of your whatever joint center you're trying to articulate, right? And then you'd calculate the joint center sort of after the capture, because you know it's in between your two markers. Whereas with the markerless, you basically identify the joint center, so you don't need the markers to calculate the joint centers. You kind of go straight to the joint center. And then what happens in the standard mocap pipeline is, you know, although you have all these joint centers, you know, there's error involved in those, and to kind of, you know that the body, like your elbow can only bend in one direction, and you know there are constraints that you can put on certain joints. So that's kind of where we put sort of kinematic modeling in play, right? So, which is basically putting a skeleton to your key points and constricting it with science and math, right? Yep. And then that's called the solve, and then that sort of generates your motion data that drives your animations. That's kind of the handoff between us and kind of Aaron's team. But yeah, so you know you're still looking and calculating everything, and you are putting sort of kinematic constraints on the body, because you know that does help with the tracking and whatnot.
And I guess in Aaron, in your experience, you've got, you know, wrist trackers and foot trackers, then you track where the head is, obviously. So you really only have 5 points of
yeah, Bob, that's right. And Mark, I want you to speak a little bit about this, because yes, we have 6 points to capture, generally capturing hands, head, feet, you know, torso, which is through, you know, what the backpack actually served as a great, you know, ability to capture the torso. So you would have your rotation, and then your hands and your head, feet. And while the solvers are great, the IK, you know, inverse kinematic solvers are great, you still have a little bit of, you know, this, what it can't do is give you some of that body fluidity that you have, right? There is still rigidity in that sort of 6 point, what we called, you know, for ourselves, you know, sparse tracking, you know, system. One of the things, and the other thing I should say, and this is really key, is that when you're relying completely on outside in tracking, meaning you have the cameras that are all looking at the markers, you have mittens, not gloves. You don't have digit articulation. Now, markerless isn't necessarily giving you the digit articulation as much as fusing the markerless with the camera-based systems inside of the headsets. But now you have this real fluid body motion and articulation of the hands. So you really are taking forward what was, I think, a limitation in the 6 point sparse tracking, you know, system that existed, in where the markerless is going. It's the first thing that I noticed when I, you know, went to the Vicon offices here in LA pre-SIGGRAPH to test what was going to be rolling out. And it was really, truly for me, you know, having spent all this time in there, that mirror moment changed. It changed for me in a real way.
Yeah.
Mark,
how much resolution? Yeah. Well, and just to follow up on that, and then, you know, because you talked about the hand tracking, is it your cameras that are doing the resolution down to the finger and hand tracking, or are you still using something like Leap Motion or Inside Out on the headsets to do that?
So for this experience, we were using the internal hand tracking, right? So fusing the hand tracking with all of the body tracking that we're doing through our Markerless solve, right? But I guess to touch on kind of Aaron's point, you imagine you're only tracking with the current solution with the pulsars these end effectors, right? And you have to try and again with kind of sort of some math. You assume if my hand here that my elbow is here because my head's here and my body's here, right? So there's assumptions on where the rest of your body is based on these end effectors, right? But now with this Markerless tracking, we're literally tracking the whole body. So that's kind of what gives that fluidity, because we have a lot more points that we're tracking to be able to kind of actually say, no, I know your elbow's here, right? So this is where I'm going to put it, right? So
I guess I might use the wrong term of resolution, but how many points can you track with the machine vision cameras now without the markers? Do you think of it that way?
I mean, that used to be a bit of a buzzword, or how many key points do you have? I mean, but really, you only need enough key points to be able to create a solve. So
enough is the answer.
You know what I mean? You don't need hundreds of key points, because a lot of them become irrelevant, right? You just need enough key points to be able to sort of generate the solve required to the fidelity that you need it to be.
Okay, so somewhere between 6 and too many, you're in that enough range. Yeah, cool. James, you got a question for us?
I was typing in something, but I'll ask Mark directly. I was just looking at the new hardware and everything. It looks amazing. Right now we use outside-in tracking for our body solve. We have 6-point tracking for feet and hands and arms, and those are really important because people are stepping up to an actual physical edge, and that their feet have to match that edge when they get up there. So very important for us, but we've been looking at inside-out tracking, and this looks great. I guess the solve, from what I'm hearing you say, isn't just about the one position. These cameras are actually predicting or solving for other portions of the body from these cameras. Is that correct?
So I guess with the Markerless system, we're solving the whole body, right? So it's the current solution that's in the Dreamscape is these pulsars, which are active markers. So the current commercial solution is using active markers, the 6-point solve, which sort of gives you a sparse solve, whereas this new Markerless solution doesn't have any markers, right? And it's solving for the whole body. So you get.
So in my scenario, mine's a little unique because people aren't wearing pants and a t-shirt, they're wearing a wingsuit. So it's a little bit harder to see arms and legs in that scenario. Do you think it would still perform in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see sort of why not. Like it's using machine learning, and I guess it may be that you just need to train the model with some of the data with people with wingsuits on and sort of teach it what it does. But it's the same with people wearing skirts, right? People wearing, as long as you can kind of provide the training data for the model to kind of recognize actually what it is, then the output of that is pretty straightforward.
Cool. Sign me up.
That's amazing. Aaron, how much effort did your team have to put in to integrate this new? Was it plug and play into your existing system, or did you guys have to do some work to integrate the new tracking models?
It's interesting. Relative to the content, plug and play. Now, the fact of the matter is, it's a hard question to truly answer because our team, the Dreamscape side and the Vicon side, have had such a close collaborative relationship for many years now that it's a very natural, language, and our systems integrated with their systems from day one. So very easy, but content, we made no adjustments to the content, to be able to afford it running on the system. Meaning all the titles that we have would be backwards compatible without having to go in and, reprogram.
And cool. I think just to sort of add on that, we understand the importance of pipeline, right? And as a technology provider to organizations like Dreamscape, right, there's a handover of data. So as long as we can kind of put this new modality into our existing kind of pipeline of feeding data to the solve that they need, right? It is just kind of sort of pulling it out and putting something back in, right? Because we've developed this with our existing infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Which is,
I mean, it's exactly true. In fact, we were going back and forth on the merits of this piece of content for the demonstration, the merits of this piece of content versus that piece of content. But work in the background already then wasn't even part of the consideration. It was just what would demonstrate what shows, shows the best.
Yeah. Mark, you mentioned, I've heard, 6 players, in a space. Are there, what are the limitations, the practical limitations initially, theoretical limitations eventually, and how do you handle occlusion as you start, as the spaces kind of shrink or swell or get more crowded?
Yeah, and that's again a challenge that comes to training the model to be able to understand and see, and it is different because if you compare it to markers, right? If I have a marker on my chest and I hide it, you can't see the marker, right? Whereas if you can't hide your whole body, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we have cameras that are watching the space, and although you might be occluded in one image, it's unlikely that you'll be occluded in all the cameras, right? Unless you go into a huddle and you kind of occlude the person completely, which is its own challenges. But
could be a good game there.
Yeah. But I guess the limitations, you're limited by kind of the resolution at which you can resolve these images, and then I guess the space which you're trying to track, which is why it was so great with the Dreamscape crew is we have a set footprint, right? We have a set number of people, so it kind of really helps us focus and actually deliver this the kind of the core of what's required to provide that level of immersion in their experiences.
Yeah, Aaron, I wonder, just from just thinking out loud, like there are some big spaces, like I did this EVA esports space, which is 5,000 square feet, but only 10 players, and do you really need full body tracking for that? And I don't know the answer to that. It's just a honest question. Where do you see? Do you see that it's the smaller, more intimate spaces where this type of full body tracking makes the most sense? But if you're going to put 40 people in a 5,000 square foot space and have them, do something, is there a sense of scale where it makes sense and a sense of scale where it probably doesn't? And I know there's no right or wrong answer to this. I'm just curious about your thinking.
No, it's an interesting question, and I'll come at it from 2 places. One, for us, sort of story and narrative has been an important part. So being there is everything. And so having that sense of yourself is everything. And I don't know that that is necessarily driven by the number of people in the experience. It could be as intimate as 2 or great as 12. I mean, certainly I think you get diminishing returns in story at large groups. Although, look, I mean, I can contradict myself by talking about being an audience member at Sleep No More, which is one of the things, by the way, that brought us to this space, which is the fact that live immersive theater doesn't scale with casts of hundreds, in 40,000 square foot multi-level warehouses, et cetera. But we can bring that to the experience and sort of bring that, everywhere, to all corners of the world. What really has driven our space, and I'm sure James can appreciate this from the Times of the Void, is this standard nuisance in the world of construction called column lines. And you have to exist within them, because there is nothing more dangerous than having a column in the center of a free roam experience from a insurance, health, and hazard perspective. So a standard column line, you would find in these sort of 24 or 30 foot bays. And by the way, a Dreamscape pod is 24 by 24, feet on the outside, so that we could be able to really bring ourselves into as many, common locations as possible. It's a challenge. It makes for an interesting and unique challenge that forces creative solves to how you can make that space feel infinite, because obviously you're in a frameless world. And I think we've and others have navigated and tackled that, quite artfully. But to the point of the question, I think it's all about the content that you're servicing.
Yeah, cool. What does this do? And we're going to get into some of the questions that come in. And I love some of the questions coming in because it just gives you an idea of the breadth of audience that we've got out there. How is this going to impact? We know it's going to impact operational cost, Aaron. Like, it's going to reduce operational costs. It's going to reduce friction. It's going to have some marginal increase to throughput. But Mark, as far as like cost of solution, Vicon's always been a premium solution for premium markets. How does this impact, if it does, the cost of the solution going forward for LBE?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to answer in the current state we are in with this solution. I guess the showcase of innovation, we're not quite at product yet. So, but having I guess making motion capture accessible to people that otherwise wouldn't have access to motion capture, right? In the history of it, right? The life sciences, you'd have professionals to run these systems because you have to put the markers on in exactly the right place. You have to know how to run the software, right? Those are all user experience blocks that are kind of stopping people from utilizing this tool, right? So the idea with moving to Markerless is making it, giving access to people that you don't need to be a mocap expert to run this, right? You don't have to sort of be a biomechanist, PhD to be able to kind of sort of set the experiments or the applications up. So in that sense, it's reducing the barriers to entry, and I'm sure a lot of the associated cost with the pulsars that we kind of provide, the existing solutions will drop the end price ultimately. But,
do you need more cameras to do this, or is it the same basic number of cameras based on square footage and people, or how does that scale?
Still TBD. Still TBD.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And the other thing you mentioned, you talked about calibration in the old system. You have to hold it at T, and you said in this one you don't have to do that. Is there a calibration, or can you just move people in and out freely, and the system figures it out?
For the demo at SIGGRAPH, we did have a calibration, and it's not a T-pose. You just stand there looking straight ahead. But that will be quickly pulled out, right? That was sort of to make sure that sort of everything was checked at the start, and as it gets sort of productized, those user experience flows will all be kind of ironed out, right?
Yeah, cool. I'm just gonna jump to a couple of questions. So, as far as deployment goes, how long do you expect for somebody to actually get a system like this up and running for a project? Is it? And the way I like to ask that question is days, weeks, months, or hours. I guess you could say hours on the short end.
If they had a system, how long would it take to get up and running?
Yeah.
I mean, it's you mount your cameras, right? You calibrate the volume, and you're away laughing, right? So
yeah, it's super quick. I mean, if you think about the amount of time that you have to set up a full stage at a conference, that's about how long it took to roll this in. Our teams can set up a stage in a day and a half.
Yeah, cool. I love this question. Wouldn't have predicted this one. Would this tracking system work inside a cargo aircraft in flight, flying in an orbit with 2 users?
If you set the cameras up and you calibrated it, absolutely.
Because as long as the environment itself is fixed, right?
Yeah, the volume is fixed. Yeah, you can do whatever you want with the volume.
I would like to know what's behind that question.
Yeah.
That was Elon from SpaceX. So the next question is, Tim from LinkedIn wants to know, are you able to track head position data through a tracking system like this. And so I guess on one case, if you've got the headset and you're using hybrid tracking, you're using the IMUs and the headset and the inside-out cameras to do that. But if you didn't have a headset,
so I guess
track your head.
I guess to make the point in what we showcased at SIGGRAPH, it was multimodal to show the importance of markers and markerless, right? So we did have pulsars on the headset so that we track that as well as the props that were in the environment with the pulsars, because you can it's super accurate. It's especially for the head that tracking needs to be super accurate. But you take the headset off, and if you don't need to be immersed, you don't need to wear anything on your head. And in that case, then everything is tracked. So the demo that I was giving every 2 times a day, I gave a sort of a presentation at the front. I was tracked with nothing, right? So there's a fun Instagram video of one of my talks, and the team made a Ken doll that was following me on the screen behind me. So every sort of mimicking my every move, and awesome. That was tracked kind of full markerless. Yeah.
Awesome. And then this was an interesting question because I've seen these before. I'm not a big fan of them, but the IMU based trackers, like the new Sony consumer, it's kind of like a consumer creator one, I think. What's your both of you? What's your take on those? And do they are they dead? Like, do they have where's their place? I guess in the tracking world is probably the question, maybe.
Well, I mean, I can jump in saying that I've had, the opportunity to test these, and we look at every potential solution, and we look at them all earnestly, because I do believe that there is a place in the world where inside out has a lot of really strong application and utility, and where outside in has a lot of strong application and utility. And again, it's all about what's the case for which you're using. In the case of the, for example, the Sony piece, I had the opportunity to review it, and I think it's a really cool consumer, piece. And that's how it was initially built, right? It is to be able to animate you inside of, if you want to create your own videos for social, if you wanted to be able to become alive inside of a VR chat, where you don't require multiple, where you don't require super precision, where the drift is acceptable, where more latency, because, it's tracking through and it's Bluetooth connected to the solver happening essentially on the phone, and then feeding that into the thing. So I believe that's a really great, piece for a consumer side. My comment to the team at Sony about that was, I'd be really interested to be able to get under the hood, have my team get under the hood, understand what kind of data is produced, if there's going to be a professional line that is going to be contemplated. And then you can see if it has more of, an application in our space. So I encourage everybody that is working on these things to continue working on these things, because scale of this industry is going to come by really being able to create content for all different kinds of use cases. What we do with Vicon is an amazing premium experience. Bob, you said it at the beginning. Vicon is, is a standard bearer, is a gold standard. And I like to think of Dreamscape in the same way. What we do will have limitations to some of the places it can go in that form of expression. I think there needs to be variants and derivatives that will be enabled by these other forms of tracking technology, so that we can bring this to the widest potential audiences wherever they may be. So I think that's where some of that IMU developing technology actually has value to the mission.
Yeah, good. Mark, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, IMUs are close to my heart. I started a company called iMeasureU, which was acquired by Vicon about sort of 7 years ago, which was an inertial measurement unit company, right? So I understand the ins and outs of inertial measurements and the challenges that you have with them. And I think, Vicon, we do have the new Blue Tridents in our toolbox of motion capture modalities, right? And this kind of, again, this Markerless just adds another modality to that toolbox, right? So for us, we have the active, the passive, the inertial, and now kind of the Markerless. And you know, we never went down trying to do full body solves because of the challenges that came with inertial and kind of the science and use cases that, you know, in that wearable technology kind of sort of bubble. But you know, it's yeah, like Aaron said, there's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah, cool. I think that Devin Johnson has a question. I think it's going to be similar to what you said about James with the wingsuit, but from an accessibility standpoint, you know, if somebody's in a wheelchair, let's say, or a mobility device in with a room with other people who are, you know, more mobile and standing, will it be able to solve for that? Is it, again, just a matter of training the model, or is that, how does it deal with that today?
We did actually test a wheelchair in Geneva, and it worked. So yeah, we have set it up for accessibility, which, you know, understanding the importance of that in the world, right? So yeah, we it's nice to be able to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a key and critical aspect for what we do. Every Dreamscape experience is, you know, fully accessible, and so these solutions need to be.
Yeah, cool. So Aaron, so two questions, parts. One question, two parts. Imagine the pandemic had never happened. Where do you think Dreamscape would be now? And considering that it did, what's your next step? Like, where do you go from here?
Sure. Geez, I don't even know how to imagine a world where the pandemic didn't happen. Maybe we'd be in a cargo plane with all people orbiting the Earth. Listen, I think the same can be said for Dreamscape as every other LBE that was, you know, developing its offering pre-pandemic. We were all in a big build the flywheel, you know, cycle. With massive scaling that was looking at domestic and international, looking at what are the partnerships that unlock that and create that. We had a great, you know, strategic partnership with an investment from AMC in the Middle East with our partners in Majid Al Futtaim, and an incredible number of those that were all in, you know, the works. The pandemic had a different idea for what was going to happen to the world of experience and the world of those that were really great strategic partners that were looking at the totality of what scaling our kind of business does, not only for the business itself, but how it relates and affects their businesses, how it adds to that. Well, coming out of the pandemic, you know, the world's different. Those businesses are really focused on and need to be retrenched and refocused on what their core business is and trying to figure those out. So it's really, you know, what we've been looking at is what is that next generation of LBE? What are the things that really make the unit economics work? And a big part of the challenge of the unit economics of LBE are, one, what we know, the throughput in, you know, duration of experience, the relationship between throughput, duration of experience, and price per, you know, ticket. We know that that's a delicate balance and one that needs to be played with. But what underpins all of that challenges unit economics is two big numbers: rent and labor, right? And so Markerless isn't going to do anything for rent. It's just, I wish it could. And Mark, when you figure that out, please let me know. But as far as labor, Markerless won't increase the number of turns, but what it does do is reduce your coverage costs. It reduces the OpEx. It reduces the amount of times where a person gets so excited and they do this and their pulsar smashes against a railing and breaks or flies off their hand, all of those things. For Dreamscape, I think that, you know, since the pandemic did happen, and since the pandemic did decide that it was going to give a great pause interrupt to a massive scaling moment for the business, that coming out of it, we are actually somewhat, you know, fortunate. One, it allowed us to really focus on what were additional business units that were already in play. So not a pivot, but brought attention away from the things that couldn't be achieved anymore, you know, bringing people in entertainment center, and into other missions that were incredibly vital and were really negatively affected by the pandemic, i.e. education, and gave birth to Dreamscape Learn, which utilizes all of this technology, but in pursuit of, really changing the face of education through exploration and narrative. But back on the sort of LBE side of things, I think that these new technologies allow the opportunity for us to look at what does it mean to be a partner? What does it mean to be able to bring our experiences into larger locations? And it's sort of a variation on the theme going in, but I think what we feel is it doesn't need to be its own box. And in fact, it's really great if it's part of a larger box. So that's a big part of our exploration right now in the future of LBE for Dreamscape, married with these great technology advancements.
Yeah, cool, thanks. And so, Mark, where do you see, so what do you got your eye on now in the future? Like, what are the challenges in front of you? And obviously you got to get this productized, and where do you see the tracking, markerless tracking technology evolving to? Like,
well,
maybe I'll hold up my iPhone and we've all seen those videos all over LinkedIn for the last 6 months from companies showing iPhone tracking, not real time, but for production. And so how democratized does it get?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's for us, it's I guess the relationship with Dreamscape was providing the focus and clarity and customer voice, right? Which was make sure that we focused on a problem, we knew what the problem was, and we iterated and continued to do that. And what kind of came out, one of the big points with the SIGGRAPH was actually us launching this Pioneer program, which is starting to pull in, invite customers, right, to join and provide a voice to help actually guide where we go with this product, right?
Yeah, wow.
We've built this innovation, this capability that we know, we're not the experts. Aaron's the expert in LBE, right? So we have kind of that relationship with LBE, but there are so many other experts and so many other use cases that can make use of this. I mean, James, your wingsuit is a prime example, right? We've got hundreds and thousands of customers that will dream up amazing ideas and how to kind of leverage this technology. So the Pioneer program is collecting all those people and providing them to actually have a voice in defining the use cases that we kind of tick off next as we start to build this modality out into what we see will be a modality that can hold its own in the use case that it needs to be, right? So
Yeah.
along with market and inertial and be there as whether it's I don't know, EA who wants to do a new Tiger Woods, but Tiger won't put on the markers, right? So I do think this modality will just be a sort of a menu choice for people to choose whether it suits their use case or not as we start to build that.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. The one thing I just want to add to that is I think there's an incredible enterprise, application here for Dreamscape, one of the business units. I know we're known for and we're thought about in what we do in entertainment, building that voice, that brand, what we're doing in education through Dreamscape Learn, but as well what we're doing in synthetic training and simulation, which has a really strong application case for Markerless, because you want to be as real-time, as articulated, as present, without friction, and being able to move through these environments is key and critical. So that's something that we're seeing a lot of interest and excitement from our customers and partners in sort of the public sector space, meaning, in agency side.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Do you see a use? I've had a lot of people say, we've built this retail entertainment location and it's only busy Friday, Saturday, Sunday. What can we do the rest of the week? Do you see, and you're in both, education, you're in training, you're in entertainment. Have you thought about, is it possible where we have these mixed use tracked spaces that, change modalities and markets based on day parts?
we've definitely had those conversations, right? Can you create hub and spoke, optimize the day parts, and look at utilizing these things for education, training, enterprise, et cetera? You know, I don't know that we've cracked the code on that yet. It may still be hub and spoke, but specific to the use case itself. I think time will tell.
Yeah, cool. Well, I don't think there's any, Aaron, if we got any more questions, go ahead and post them in here. But I think that's about a wrap. Parting words, Mark?
I'm excited. You know, this is like I've kind of said, you know, we've been working on this for the past sort of, you know, while, and to be able to talk about it openly and to show the world, you know, at SIGGRAPH of what it's capable of. You know, I'm just really excited about the next steps and you know what comes out of this Pioneer program and what our customers can dream up and how they use this. It's How
do people get information about the Pioneer program?
It's on our website. I think it's vicon.com Pioneer program. So anyone sign up to that and you'll come in to our comms, and we're starting to kind of sort out the messaging there at the moment. So
Awesome, thank you. And Aaron, parting thoughts?
Yeah, well, I really just want to say one, you know, incredible, you know, thanks to Vicon, Mark, Imogen, and I mean the entire team for the partnership. It's really been incredible. What, you know, they've been incredible development partners, and really appreciate everything that we've been able to do together, and look forward to a really great, fruitful, continuing relationship. And Bob, I want to thank you for bringing us together and the voice that you create for all of us in this industry. You really, really are an incredible amplifier of everything that's happening out there. So, you know, a great, you know, debt of thanks and gratitude to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. I think we'll just stop right there. James, what about you? You got any parting words for us? A special guest?
You need to come back and race me, Bob. We're racing now, and it's incredible. So you got to come back and fly. I don't know. I'm super excited about this. I know the biggest issue with a lot of the tracking that we deal with is user error when we're bringing new employees on and teaching them the system, and to have something that's just flawless, so they can just push buttons and not worry about position or calibration or all that stuff would be incredibly awesome. So hopefully I get a chance to help test some of this and give you more information on how to make it better. So I'm excited about the future of all of this. So thank you.
Yeah, cool. I just want to, and I want to say, you know, to Mark, you know, to your organization's credit, and as the technology continues to get better, I do think that this is, as James said, it's, you know, I think part of the, you know, the location-based VR market hasn't crossed the chasm, if you're familiar with that model, right? And I think there's two issues there. One is just that the friction has continued to be too high, whether it's reliability, whether it's, you know, labor rate, whether it's complexity. There's just a number of areas where it hasn't quite crossed over. And I think that this is a piece of that puzzle. I think the Focus 3 clearly is a piece of that puzzle. I think, you know, getting Wi-Fi 6E and cables gone and more backpacks is a piece of the puzzle. And now, you know, I think markerless tracking is going to be, there's just one more piece of that puzzle that we put it together. I think we'll start ticking away at that mainstream market where this stuff can start to explode. It's inevitable, but it's certainly taking longer than I thought it was going to take to get there. And I appreciate all the work that you guys have done. And Aaron, you know, same to you, man. The work that you guys have done, the ability to take on the challenge of trying to tell a story where the participant is in the middle. It's never been done before. We don't know how to do it. And you guys are like trying to crack that code. And I think that's it's valuable work. And once you figure it out, there'll be lots of people copying it, which will be better for all of us. So you guys all keep up the good work.
Love it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron. Everybody from HTC, thanks for letting us do this. And if you have questions, you know how to reach us. bobc@bobcooney.com is my email. Website, bobcooney.com, vicon.com. Aaron, what's your website?
Dreamscapeimmersive.com.
Dreamscapeimmersive.com. Limitless Flight, James Jensen. I'm a huge fan. Thanks for showing up. And we will see you on another webinar in a couple of weeks. Thanks for joining.
Great.
See ya.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.